I said before that I am the editor of two literary magazines. One was CC&D and the other is Down in the Dirt. I just happened to photograph this off the street. This issue is called Dear Reader.
Oh yeah. You read it.
I love that.
and I think I even put that up, and someone who was particularly religious was like, oh, I love this. And I'm like, I was really concerned that this would be a problem on a cover. And they're like, no, because sometimes you just have to say that to be. And I'm like, people wonder why I just photograph things like, I'm going to photograph the sidewalk. Give me a moment. You know?
Oh, that's a stencil on the sidewalk.
Somebody just painted a stencil into the sidewalk and I photographed it. I'm like, I'll use that somewhere one day. I don't know. But I thought...
Hold on, look at her front. Sorry, that's a stencil off the sidewalk.
Oh, I've got a picture of that. I have photographed that.
Really?
I don't know where it's from, but
it's
oh wait, I probably credit where I photographed
it. South Congress. I've seen it on the sidewalk.
Where do I say? I didn't say where it was done, but I did it May 20.
Wonderful.
And I was like, and it's called Dear Reader. It's not called.
That's wonderful. I love that.
I like it, but. I think somebody jokingly said at an open mic, I was the multimedia emperor or something.
That's right, yeah, mistress of multimedia.
Mistress of something. So I'm going to read to you a couple pieces about that because I do that with all of my shows and I'm elaborate. This first one is called Everyday Objects Equal Performance Art. About a week before I did a poetry show, a copper pipe sprung a leak outside my back door. The repairman said copper pipes wouldn't stretch, so the weather was actually freezing, and it actually sometimes freezes in the winter here. Yeah, it's true. It actually gets cold in Texas, even if the winters last for like a week or something. But so they stopped the water flow and they started hacking this copper to replace it with something that's more stretchable. And once they'd removed this copper with the faucet, they set it down. I picked it up, twisted the faucet. Once they removed that copper wire, I did this and I asked, hey, are you throwing this away? And they said, well, they didn't have any need for it. So I told them that I'd throw it away for them. And I brought it into my house and I thought, I'm going to use this while I read poetry. So as I advertised my feature, I said the poems would be flowing like water, so don't miss the show. And a printed poem was actually cut and taped into a long, thin strip and stuffed inside of the copper tube. So when the big day came for the show, I asked for somebody to pull on the poem as I turned the faucet and read my poem to a live audience as it came out of the copper tube. The host of the event even wore my paper strip with him for the rest of the evening because, well, if you can wear poetry, why not? I don't know where creativity comes from. I don't know if it's a gene that you're born with, and I don't know if it's only surfaces when you're faced with new challenges what we have to contend with. But I don't think it's something you can just switch on like a faucet. You can't just say, excuse me, I'm going to have to shift and go into my office now and be creative. And I don't think it works that way. It never does. But it might not be that only a select few people are creative. It might be that all you have is that we all have that capacity for creativity. It's just a matter of understanding that some of us learn how to turn on that creative faucet in us so we could really get our creative juices flowing. And to follow that one up, I've got two of them here. This one's called Queen of Multimedia for a Reason. Once people are offered a 10-minute time slot for performing poetry. Most people call this a poetry reading, but I call it a show. Why? For instance, I incorporate music any time that I can, and if I can't do it live, I'll settle for a recording from my musician friends. For years, I used PowerPoint for a huge screen of my art to coincide with my poetry, or else I display videos, either by making videos to display or by filming me while I read and then showing it live on a big screen. And no, I didn't play with props or to distract people from my writing, but to incorporate different senses so that people could remember my poetry with both sights and sounds. And sure, they might have granted me that title Queen of Multimedia and Multimedia Diva back in Chicago, but it's more than that. It's more than throwing technology into poetry performance art shows. I'm not trying to be the poetry shock jock. I just look at things in a different way. And so I do this to get my message across and hammer my poetic point home. And, you know, sometimes it's funny to use more than just words. Once, I did a show of poems about other countries. I displayed on a screen a giant drawing of a TV while my photo slideshow scrolled on this screen of my drawn TV while I sat in a drawing of a giant chair and clicked on a giant mock remote control. Because if the world doesn't match what you want sometimes, and at least I can just draw the world as I want it to be. And yeah, it can be all about props by creating a Wink Martindale long, thin game show host microphone but the thing was, the mic was perfect for my Warhol wig that I wore and my 50s style jacket. I think it was this jacket, actually. When my poetry feature became the Poetry Game Show. Other poets each read poems of mine, and after I borrowed a sound pressure meter, I awarded the poet with the loudest applause with a paper Burger King crown adorned with Poetry Game Show winner tags all over it. I did a show about conflicts with cops by wearing a prison orange, removing the handcuffs from my feature, and then standing in front of a height ruler just like I was getting my mugshot taken. I did a show like I was on a cell phone. This is what you do in a short-term notice. But I'm on a cell phone reading poems like they were actually conversation. Because how many times have you been able to listen in on someone else's loud-mouthing in their own world on their own cell phone? I wrote a poem about being an open book, and I read it at a show after using novel pages to make a paperback jacket. Because really, you could guess a thing or two about me by listening to what I actually read. I have that paperback jacket in my library still. Because, yeah, I've done a lot of shows standing right here on a stage and reading poems. But when it comes down to it, those aren't the shows that people remember. Because if you can incorporate people or props or music or video into a show, then it's something that people remember. Well, then that makes me think that if being a poet is one thing, well, maybe when it comes to poetry shows, maybe being a queen of multimedia isn't such a bad thing after all.
Well done.
I had to do this, include this after an acceptance from somebody. People like this one, and I'd like to share it with you, and it is called, what is he scrolling through photos? It scares me.
No, it's just gone.
Oh, you want to do something? Here's the neat thing. You click it on, and you say on, and there it is.
Magic.
It's magic, isn't it? And now I've lost my spot. And now I've lost my spot, now I have to go find it.
Spots everywhere.
I had a thing, and I lost my spot for it, so. Uh-oh, what did you find?
There's things on the screen.
What did you have?
Mommy, there's things on there. Get them off, get them off.
I like it in the 16th century. It's really
Hey,
good.
that's because you hit something and make it go somewhere else. I don't know what you do.
Neither do I.
But that's the key to not knowing what he's doing.
That's true.
Inside of history.
So this one is called Your Imaginary Soul Weighs 21 grams.
Yeah.
Different cultures call it different things. Your spirit, your soul. I know that we creatively believe there's something special we possess, but this elusive imaginary creature that lives within us causes much debate. Does it even exist? Is the soul real? So I found it funny that a doctor 100 years ago wanted to measure the weight of a soul. He found people sick, dying, and he weighed them just before they were about to die. And he weighed their corpses right after death. And what do you know? There was a difference in each person. The doctors found each person was about a quarter ounce lighter, which is about 21 grams. And this doesn't prove anything, but it makes me wonder, is 21 grams the weight we carry for our soul? Or do some souls carry more from the weight of the world? Is that why we're forced to share our stories, to lift our burden, so our invisible soul won't weigh us down anymore?